What's going on? What's going on, everyone? Coach Jerica here. Hopefully, you guys are having a blessed Wednesday. As I always say, I'm going to try not to be before you all very long, but I want to make sure that I am live. Hold on 1 second. All very long. I can hear myself. Alrighty. So hopefully you guys are having an awesome Wednesday. Hopefully you are getting some things done, whatever business or position that you're working. Hopefully, you've done your very best on today. The title of today's live is Wax Gross, okay? Wax Gross. And some of you guys may have heard this definition before. Some of you guys may have not heard it. And I'm going to talk about it here in just a minute. Let me turn off my notifications because someone is trying to call me. Okay. Um, some of you guys may have heard about this word, these two words before. It's in the Bible, Matthew 13:15. He talks about wax growth. What is the definition of wax growth? Wax growth, if I could say the words, basically means thick, dull, and stupid. Now, am I calling you stupid? No. But what I'm saying is that in the Bible, it says that their ears became dull, and their eyes became blind. That is the definition of wax dull. Why am I talking about this? Why am I bringing this up? The reason why I'm bringing this up is because there are some things that I've been learning on my journey, in my journey, about not just, life period, but just some of the things that are necessary for me to continue to elevate to the next level. And also some things that I was missing from before and how I was allowing myself to be held back because I was operating with a heart that was wax gross. Okay. One thing that you'll notice as I continue to do these lives is that I'm in a state now where I am forcing myself to take time each and every day to get smarter, to get wiser, and to try to remain humble. Um, for me, I come from a point very prideful. Had some arrogance, confidence there, but some of that stuff came naturally. But some of it, was stuff that I had taken on myself as well too. But through many lessons and trials and tribulations, I learned that there was a lot of things that I needed to allow God to come into my heart and change, so that I did not have a wax growth um, mindset, if you will. I had to have a paradigm shift. So, one of the things that I realized on this journey that I've been on for some time is that when things begin to happen that I didn't understand or didn't have an explanation for, couldn't make sense of it, I would oftentimes go into a point of isolation. And in this point of isolation, I would think that I was doing myself a justice, but I was actually doing myself a disjustice. Now, don't get me wrong, there are times where God will send you into a place of Kirith where it really is just you and Him. And He has you alone, and He can really speak to you and train you and really have that time with you so that you can develop a relationship with Him the way that He wants you to develop a relationship with Him. And I've been in that valley as well too, and still for the most part in it for a good portion of it. But I think back before where I would put myself in those places of solitude. I would put myself, that's the key word. I would put myself into those places of solitude because of the fact that it was hard for me to be able to receive things that people would say or people would tell me, or the way that life was. I just had a hard time being able to understand it and process it. I've talked before about the filtering process that I had in my mind. Things that would be said or intended to help me somehow would be filtered out as intending to harm me. And it took a whole lot of prayer and a whole lot of humbling and a whole lot of surrendering to really get to the point where I could allow God to truly change my heart posture. I talked before about me having to have a heart transplant. I don't mean physically laying on the table in the hospital surgical room. I mean God's heart transplant. And when I began to have God's heart transplant, it there was no anesthesia. Okay, there was no anesthesia. It hurt, and it hurt in ways where it didn't break me, but it built me. And that's the thing. Sometimes God will have to take you down a certain to a certain level so that he can build you back up in him. And see, because of the fact that I had been put together by so many different broken pieces, I was not whole. I was a shattered human being. I was a shattered human being, and I really did not know how to receive God's love. Even though I believed that he loved me and deep inside, I didn't know how to receive his love. And so it was very hard for me to interpret that. And so I would oftentimes, when I would go to church and hear the pastor speak and stuff, it would feel really good. And I would think that I had it and I'm able to go on with my life and see you again next week. But what was I doing in between time, in the meantime? And one thing that I had to understand about, the faith that I thought I had at that point in time, come to find out it really wasn't faith. But the faith that I thought I had at that point in time, as soon as it was tested, it would waver. It would waver because it wasn't the kind of faith that I really needed. It hadn't been, it hadn't been founded and grounded in the right heart setting. It hadn't been founded and grounded in the right heart setting. Or you can also say too that God didn't really have a place for him to sow in. My heart, it was dirty. It was a dirty heart. It wasn't a place for him to be able to sow in because there was no room. I had provided him no room. I had provided him no place to dwell. And I still thought that I was good. I still thought that I was okay. And then as time began to go and as I began to face different trials and tribulations, I began to understand that in actuality, when I thought that I was doing things correctly with God, I actually was doing me. And then I would consult God. And that's the kind of faith that I had. I would do what I wanted to do, and then I would ask God to bless it. I would go through and get in these relationships or go and do these, get myself in a new situation or whatever the case may be. And then I would ask God to bless it. And that is exactly the opposite of what God wants you to do. And so for me, understanding that if faith comes by hearing and hearing by the word, I wasn't hearing it. I was hearing it on Sunday, but if I was operating from a heart posture that was wax gross, then was I really hearing him? Was I really being able to receive him? I wasn't. I wasn't able to receive or hear him because my heart was wax gross. That means that it was thick, it was stubborn, and I was not operating wisely. Okay. I was ignorant to the true love and the true relationship that God had for me. It was very difficult for me to be able to receive that because I was in a place where I felt like I did not need him. I felt like I could do it better than he could. Now, it's hard to sit here and say that. Now, it's hard to sit here and say that. But I always felt like if I didn't do it, then nobody would. If I didn't get it done, then nobody could do it. I just always felt like I had to do it. I had to depend on me. And so, because of that mindset, even though that mindset came through years and years and years of jacked up thinking, years and years and years of jacked up believing, even though it did come from that, I was not in a position mentally, spiritually, emotionally to be able to think or receive anything different. I would hear it, but I wouldn't hear it. There's a difference between listening and hearing. Let me say it that way. There's a difference between listening and hearing. Okay. And so for me, I was like, oh my God, like, what am I missing? Why is it that I keep hearing these bomb trainings, these bomb teachings, and I can't seem to put it together? What am I missing? My heart was wax gross. That's what I was missing. And so when I realized that, I had to go back to a point and I had to go to God with a humble heart, prostrate to the ground. I had to go to him with a humble heart. And I was like, God, there is something that I'm truly, truly missing. And I really need you to come in and feel my heart. Remove whatever this shattered mess is that I'm dealing with. I don't want it no more. It's exhausting. I'm tired of it. Because if faith comes by hearing, okay, and if my heart is wax gross, I'm not able to hear and I'm not able to see. So when you have preachers and teachers and trainers and leaders and all these people trying to get this stuff into you, it's just bouncing off of you. And that's what was going on with me. It was bouncing off of me. I couldn't receive it. There was no place for me to put it. There was no place for me to put it. Sure, it sounded good in the moment. Sure, it felt good in the moment. Sure, in that moment, I could see it. I could see myself being my best self. I could see myself being the best version. I could see myself wealthy. I could see myself rich. I could see myself doing all these things. But then what happens when the camera goes off? What happens when church service is over? What happens when it's time for you to go home? Back to your own surroundings, to your own place, to your own dwelling, to your own memories, to your own misery. What happens then? That's when your faith really has to kick in. And for me, at a point in time, when I would go back, that's literally what I was doing. I was going back, I was going backward. And so when you get to a point and you're like, you know what? Mm-mm, mm-mm, this ain't right. Like this isn't natural. This I should not be feeling this way all the time. I should not be interpreting things this way all the time. I should not be sitting here struggling like I am emotionally and mentally and physically and financially. This is not what God wants for me. And so when I got to that point that I understood that it was time for me to develop a true relationship with God so that I actually can start to understand what faith really is and what faith really looks like, then I was able to start to make changes. And then that's when the wax growth that was covering my entire existence, that's when that stuff started to melt like a candle. And now I was able to start to hear things. And it's so funny because when you hear things that you've heard before, it's different. It hits different when you not only hear it, but you feel it. Because if you can't hear the faith, you can't feel the faith. You can't necessarily see it. I mean, that's what the word says. But if you can hear it and you can feel it, then you can envision it. You can envision it. You may not know the how or the when, but you can see it. You can envision it. Okay? You can envision it. And so for me, it started to get exciting. I was like, okay, I've heard this before. I've heard this several times, actually. And each time it's been said to me, I thought I got it, but now it feels different. It feels different. And, they say a lot of times that more money, more problems. That's true to a certain extent. But what I'm realizing is that the more faith you have, the more battles you're going to have. But let me tell you something on the flip side of that. The less faith you have, the more trouble you're going to have. And the less faith I had, the more trouble. I was always running in some type of trouble, some type of problem. But that started to change. And now it's not trouble, there's just battles. But the funny thing about it when you're operating in faith is that battles are not yours. It's not yours. It's a difference. It's a difference. As we like to say, it hit different. There is a difference between troubles and battles. The more faith you have and the more that you dive into and receive and understand faith, like what faith really is and what it really feels like, the more you start to understand, oh wow, that's what they was talking about. That's what they mean. So if I wasn't hearing the faith, I wasn't receiving the faith because I didn't believe the faith. Therefore, I couldn't apply the faith. So instead, the only thing that I really was getting was doubt and unbelief. I had a relationship with doubt and unbelief. And with doubt and unbelief, I also gained a relationship with fear. Then I also gained a relationship with rejection. Then I also gained a relationship with envy. Then I also developed a relationship with abandonment and all these other things that came along with it. None of that was of God. None of that was of God. So, You got to understand that God, He really wants to sow into your heart, but He's not going to sow into bad ground. He's not. He's not going to do that. They oftentimes say God's not going to bless your mess. You can't be sitting here living in sin and be like, okay, God, bless it. That's not how it works. You got to do some work. And the thing is that we live in such a microwave society, and we want things right now, right now, right now. And the thing is that I found on this journey that I've been on that the best things is really, really worth waiting for, because the refining and the purifying that, if you allow Him to, that God does when you are in your season, okay, you have to understand gold has to go through the fire, diamonds have to go through the pressure in order to become a diamond. Gold has to go through the fire, diamonds have to go through the pressure. But when you learn to develop a relationship with God that is truly penetratable in your heart, then you start to understand things differently. You start to kind of see how He's working. He doesn't want you to move too hasty. He doesn't want you to move too quick, but He does want you to move in confidence. And He does want you to move in assurity and know that He is with you and He's gone before you. He's already been down your road. He already knows what you're going to do. He already knows what you're going to say. He already knows what you're going to think. He already knows what you're going to feel. He already knows. And the thing is that when you refuse wisdom, and when you refuse knowledge, and when you refuse training, and when you refuse discipleship, and when you refuse to answer your calling, you can lose it. You can lose it. You can lose it. I feel I feel that, and it makes my heart heavy for people, like it really does. And it's like, I used to run from my calling because I used to, it's like I feel stuff, and I didn't like to feel stuff because I felt like feeling stuff made me vulnerable. You know what I mean? And it's just like, no, God, no, that's too mushy. I don't want to feel stuff. But I did. I felt stuff and I feel stuff. And you have to be very, very careful when you're on your journey about who you're around and who you listen to. You have to make sure that those people, they've gone ahead of you and they've gone through their fair share of battles, and they understand some things about faith, and they understand some things about wisdom. And I'm very grateful that God has placed people in my life to be able to teach me, that I can glean from, that I can learn from, and that inspire me to keep pushing, because you got to have your own motivation. You have to have your own desire to change. And for a while, I thought I had it, but I realized I was just pretending. If you're not operating from your true self, from your true authentic self, then you are pretending. I hate to break it down to you like that, but if you're not operating from your true authentic self, then everything else you're doing is pretending. It's not penetrating because you're just faking it. You're just faking it. You're pretending like you got it. You're pretending like you got it all figured out. Trust me, I know I did it for a while and I thought I had it. And that's the kicker. You will think you have it figured out until you realize that you don't. And when you realize that you don't, it's a humbling experience. But the beauty in it all is that God still loves you. He still loves you. He still wants you. He still desires to sow into your heart. The question is, are you going to let him? Are you going to let him? Hmm. For so many years, I thought I was letting him, but I look, I was giving him the pieces I was working with. Well, here you go. Here you can work on this, God, but I'm gonna keep this. You can change that over here, but I'm gonna keep this. When you get to the point and you say, I'm no longer scared of going through the valley. I'm no longer scared of the trials. I'm no longer scared of the tests. I'm no longer scared of the valley. I'm no longer scared of the battles. I'd rather be obedient while I can than be forced to do it. I'd rather be obedient at my own will, okay, than be forced to. And because of the fact that I've had a history of being hard headed, I was forced to a lot of times. And now I'm in a season where it's truly a choice. I mean, I could go do some things and try to solve problems very quickly, but I choose to trust in God and I choose to trust in His process. And when you start to allow Him to penetrate your heart, that heart muscle, and you allow Him to give you that open heart surgery that He so desperately wants to give you, when you start doing that, you start seeing things differently. It's not as hard as you think it is. He does a lot of stuff for you. It's like, oh, wow, wow, okay. Let me give you an example. Have you ever held on to something that you knew was just, you just really wasn't supposed to have unless you went through a certain process to keep it? Hopefully that makes sense. Well, I was in that situation recently, but in the past, I would have done everything I could to try to hold on to it. Well, this Derica, okay, this Derica, nice to meet you, by the way. I let it go. I was like, "Phew, I'm not going to sit here and get stressed out. No, I'm not. No." So I let it go. In the process of doing that, it created some space. It created some time. Okay. And so I just decided it was time for me not only to clear the clutter in my head, but also begin to clear some of the clutter in my house. So I began to go through mail. All right. That's a tedious task for me. I don't like paperwork. So I will stack it over in a basket. I'll put it in a box. I'll put it in a drawer. Okay. But this particular day, I decided to sit down and go through this mail. So I started going through the mail and making a trash pile and all that good stuff. And as I'm going through this mail, I see a couple of envelopes that just kind of look peculiar to me. I'm like, okay, well, who's this from? So I open up the envelopes and to my surprise, there are two settlement checks in that stack of mail. Now, God does everything in decency and in order. Okay. I believe that had I had not gone through that first step, okay, and opened up my fists and said, you know what, I'm going to let this go. I'm going to let this go. It's bigger than me at this point in my life. I'm going to let this go. If it's meant for me to have it, then I will have it. If it's not, then I will not. And God will work it out. I wasn't worried about it. I wasn't going to be stressed out about it. I wasn't going to be in fear to try to keep it. I'll let it go. So, in the process of doing that, it created time for me to sit down and do this. And while I'm sitting here and going through this stuff, I find these two settlement checks. Now, here's the catch. Here's the catch. In these two settlement checks, both of them were expired. It had on there in big bold letters, void after 90 days. That 90 days had came and gone twice on both of them. Okay? So that old Derica was like, oh, well, it's too late, too late. But this Derica was like, no, 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 no. There is a reason why I found these and not to ha ha me, not to LOL me. I believe the reason why I found these was so that I can get what's in it. So I said, you know what? God opens doors that man closes, and I'm going to deposit these checks. And if they clear, then I know that I'm right. So I went ahead and I deposited them, and they held them for a few days. And then I went and I checked. And guess what? God opened doors that man closes. No explanation needed. And the funny thing is that because I trusted in God, and because of the fact that I felt that, you know what? Some things are just bigger than you. Sometimes you get in over your head. Sometimes you do a little bit too much. And I decided I got in over my head and I did a little too much and I let it go. Not only did I find those checks, but the thing that I let go, God gave back to me less than 2 days later with a better deal than I had in the first place. It was remarkable. It was unbelievable. But my point of saying all that is God works things out for your good, but you have to trust Him. You never know what He's going to do until you open up your heart and allow Him to begin to sow seeds in your heart. You never know. As long as you keep holding on to what woulda, coulda, shoulda been, you are going to miss what's waiting for you ahead and down the road. It is time to let go. It is time to allow God to do what He's been wanting to do in your life this entire time. This entire time. I can sit here and tell you right now that this new relationship that I'm developing and building, it hits different. I understand it better. I diligently desire to seek Him, to serve Him, to understand, and to tell you something. That relationship that I thought I had with Him, it was all wrong. It was all wrong. And I definitely can say I thank God for grace and mercy because He was probably like, my child, my child. I'm telling you right now. But look, if there's hope for me, okay, if there's hope for me, this wax gross heart that I had, if there is hope for me, there is definitely hope for you. So do not let the enemy make you think that you're done for, that there's no hope for you, that the relationship that you think you have is all there is. Trust me, that faith, that faith, that thing will take you far. Do you hear me? That thing will take you far. That thing will open up doors for you that you didn't even know you needed. It will open up doors for you that you didn't even know had your name on it. It will open up doors for you that you didn't even know you didn't even know were for you. Don't doubt them. Don't doubt them. And don't try to do it without them. You need them. You need them. It's time for us to surrender and it's time for us to do the things that we need to do and let God do what He got to do. Stop trying to do His job. Let Him do Him, and then you do what you got to do. But I'm telling you, it's time to really take a candle to our heart and let that wax melt. Y'all have a good one. Talk to you tomorrow.